Occasionally in gaming, we get new challengers that enter some well-established genres. The reigning kings don't get replaced or diminished by their arrival. Instead, they stand proudly beside them. Bloober Team has been one of those developers that has been steadily climbing up the horror game ladder, making some decent but not universally praised titles in the last few years. It wasn't until last year's Silent Hill 2 remake that the world finally started to understand their real power and potential as a horror game developer. And now they're back with Cronos: The New Dawn, an original game that blends key elements of some of the genre's most influential classics into something that's hauntingly unique. A game that feels both deeply personal and meticulously crafted. With so many options to play recently, I honestly jumped into Cronos mainly riding on that Halloween spirit of horror games. And I came out genuinely surprised. This one left a massive impression on me, so much so that I just had to talk about it and review it. Either way, here are my impressions of Cronos: The New Dawn. From the moment I started Cronos, I couldn't help but smile. There's no lengthy prologue or cinematic dump of exposition. Instead, it begins with old black and white footage of Cold War era Poland before cutting abruptly to our protagonist, a woman encased in a hulking metal suit that looks like a mix of vintage diving suit and early spacesuit. A computerized voice activates her, asking us a few psychological questions and then releasing her into the world. No hand-holding and no explanation. I absolutely loved it. The world you step into is barren, broken, and overrun with twisted creatures that were clearly once human. Yet your character remains unfazed, focused on their mysterious mission to locate a target for reasons that are far from clear. She mutters phrases like, "Such is our calling," speaking of a vocation and shared with other travelers who came before her. Cronos thrives on this sense of mystery and unease. You don't know who you truly are, you don't fully understand what your purpose is, but you feel that it must matter. That it must be a noble, almost divine mission to march through the ruins of a destroyed Polish city crawling with monsters. As the story unfolds, fragments of information begin to surface through cryptic notes, eerie recordings, and environmental clues. Even by the end, you'll likely be left with lots of questions, and that's honestly part of its charm. Multiple endings and small narrative breadcrumbs invite you to piece everything together. I loved how even seemingly pointless scraps of paper or posters add texture to the story, grounding it in its time and place. And honestly, the setting itself is just fascinating. The brutalist architecture and gray decay of Soviet-era Poland are rendered with striking authenticity. You can really feel this team's familiarity with this kind of environment. I've never been to this part of the world, but the design makes you believe that every cracked wall and rusted corridor has a story behind it. And then there is the Cronos element to everything. And yes, the name is an obvious hint, especially for those who know our Greek mythology. Time travel plays a role here in the story, a quite major one honestly. Occasionally you slip into the past long before the world went to hell, just to uncover how everything spiraled into ruin. But don't think those sequences are any more safe, the dangers there just take different forms. That said, the game's intentionally cryptic storytelling might not be for everyone. While the main plot threads do come together by the credits, it's easy to miss key details hidden in the notes or side interactions. My first playthrough left me with plenty of unanswered questions that required some post-game sleuthing. Personally, as a lifelong Resident Evil fan, I honestly enjoyed that. But those who prefer more straightforward storytelling in the cutscenes or interactions, might find it a bit frustrating that they would have to read all of the notes and logs that are left behind to piece together every little detail. Of course, Cronos isn't just mystery and atmosphere, it's still a horror game, and that means there are monsters to fight. The combat here feels familiar, but very deliberate in its approach. You've got the standard lineup of weapons: handguns, shotguns, rifles, and a really cool launcher weapon. But there's a twist. Standard weapons can be charged for stronger shots, while some of their variants have faster firing modes. Balancing when it comes to charging up or when to just unload on enemies is part of the fun and adds a layer of tension to everything. You also have a basic melee attack and a stomp. These are mostly used for item boxes and occasionally getting in an extra hit on an enemy, but it's pretty weak, so it's not really recommended that you use it for pure damage purposes. But fire-based attacks are where things really heat up. Literally. Every enemy in this game is weak to fire, and it's a big part of your kit. You can release the fire-based AoE or toss incendiary sticky grenades. Burning enemies doesn't just do extra damage, but it can prevent others from growing stronger. And you'll really want to manage that carefully, because here's where things get most interesting. Defeated enemies can be absorbed by others, making them stronger. It's a brilliant mechanic that forces you to prioritize targets and adding a bit of unpredictability even on replays. That deliberate combat pacing really ties into the game's difficulty. Early on especially, Cronos does not pull any punches. Enemies hit very hard and resources are super scarce. Until your upgrades really start to matter, every encounter feels tense. The tight inventory system amplifies the stress in a honestly good way. Balancing limited ammo, healing items, and key resources that you need to move on is part of what makes everything so engaging. I love the sense of pressure. Every shot feels like it counts. Every mistake feels like it could have been avoided. It's not like Dark Souls or anything, but it definitely channels that old school Resident Evil survival horror mindset. Upgrades come into play gradually, but that really makes them feel meaningful. You can enhance your armor, expand your item slots, and improve fire or weapon efficiency. Each upgrade really does feel earned, which makes progression genuinely satisfying. That said, Cronos does stumble in one area that I found genuinely disappointing, and that's enemy variety. For me, one of the most exciting parts of any good horror game, or just any great game in general, is seeing how enemies change in their design and how you engage them. How each new encounter forces you to rethink how you approach. Unfortunately, Cronos doesn't quite deliver on that front. There's only a handful of distinct enemy types throughout the campaign, so after a few hours, combat stops surprising you in what it throws at you. You start to recognize how everything's going to proceed and what their attack patterns are, so that sense of unpredictability fades faster than I would have liked. Even some of the bosses repeat, but only one or two if I can remember correctly. They start out pretty strong, creative in their designs and so on, but seeing a boss repeat again just really takes away from things. It doesn't ruin the experience, but it does chip away at the uniqueness of what was otherwise a really memorable moment. So when you compare it to something like Resident Evil or Dead Space, which consistently throws new enemies and threats at you, Cronos feels like it's playing it a bit too safe, or maybe just didn't go too far in its design variety. It's not a deal breaker by any means, and the combat is still solid. It's just an area that really stood out to me personally. Exploration and puzzles also shine here. Areas often feel huge at first, but there's some clever looping paths and shortcut unlocks that make them really feel satisfying with their sense of cohesion. Levels are also dense with plenty of side rooms, optional encounters, and secret rewards that make venturing off the main path well worth the risk. Puzzles themselves are pretty simple to be honest, but they're well paced in how they proceed. A few code locks, environmental navigation challenges, even combat-based puzzles occasionally, just to mix things up. They're never so complex that you need a pen and paper, but they'll keep your brain engaged between the fights. In the end, Cronos: The New Dawn is a standout new entry in modern survival horror. It definitely stands next to the giants that inspired it: Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Dead Space, and a few others. But it does so without feeling derivative. Its story and world drip with atmosphere, and while it asks a bit more attention than usual to fully grasp, the payoff is well worth it personally. The combat and inventory tension and environmental storytelling all come together in a really tightly designed package. Its flaws, mainly the limited freedom in encounters and some restrictive inventory space as well as the enemy design, are honestly just minor compared to what it achieves. If you love classic horror game design, skipping Cronos would honestly be a huge mistake, especially in the horror season month of October.
The anchor is intact. Well done. Accessing predecessor's travel log. Attempting data salvage. Target seated.
With games like Silent Hill F releasing just days after this one, I know that there's plenty to play and look forward to. But Cronos: The New Dawn completely earned my time and respect, so it's definitely one that's worth keeping an eye on or picking up if you're really still in the mood for horror games at the moment. It's one of those games that reminds you of why you just fall in love with this genre of survival horror in the first place. Either way, I'm Brian at Valkerion Gaming, and thank you for checking out this review. Don't forget to like, sub, and hit the bell so you don't miss out on future reviews. Let's see if we can crack 500 subs before the year is over. I know I've been a little off pace with the reviews, but I'm trying to catch up. Like I said a minute ago, there is a lot to play at the moment. I still got Silent Hill F coming. It's coming soon, hopefully. Got Digimon, and I got Pokemon, of course, coming up too. So keep it locked here for more reviews and commentary about games and more. See you next time. Bye.
Beginning with the sentence sequence.